Now, I know that you're very excited to hear this week's Parsha podcast, and I'll tell you, I'm way more excited than you are to be speaking with you right now. You see, I am recording from a different location. I'm in the Torch Center North. I'm in upstate New York, in my parents' basement. We did, I guess, the first leg of our annual drive this week. Right after my class on Sunday, I began driving, and we just arrived here on Tuesday night, and my legs felt like jelly. Driving 24 to 26 hours will do that to you, but I'm here. I'm on solid ground, on terra firma. The weather outside is delightful. It's like 100 degrees in Houston with the threat of hurricanes. But here it's nice. I always forget how nice it is. The trees and the luscious grass and the occasional deer. I was sitting outside on the deck for like 2-3 hours, just enjoying being outdoors. Even though I determined it's actually effectively cooler in Houston because everywhere in Houston, there's air conditioning. And here, because you can kind of survive without it, the air conditioner is kind of iffy. It's hit or miss. So it ended up being cooler there, but it's so nice to be outside and to enjoy the summer. And of course, what do we enjoy over summer more than the Parsha podcast? It's Parshas Korach. It's from a new location. And please God, we will continue recording throughout the summer. We have all sorts of travel plans. We got to go to Montreal for a wedding, for a Walby wedding. And of course, we go to Toronto. And now we're in New York. And we may visit Israel as well this summer. My oldest brother, Eli, his daughter is getting married and would like to go to that wedding if possible. But my plan, my hope, my prayer is that we will not miss a single edition of the Parsha podcast. It's just too important. We have this launch streak going. It's almost 4 years without missing a single week. And if we could avoid it, we will do our best to avoid it, to hopefully continue this glorious trend of a Parsha podcast each week. And this week, it's Parshas Korach. So let's begin. The story of Korach is, of course, the story of this awful insurrection, this rebellion, this mutiny against Moshe. Moshe has a first cousin. His name is Korach. Their fathers are brothers. Moshe's father is Amram. Moshe and Miriam and Aaron, their father is Amram. Korach's father is Yitzhar, and Amram and Yitzhar are brothers. And Korach is disappointed. He is dejected. He has a gripe. He has a bone to pick with Moshe. You see, Moshe is the king. He is the leader of the Jews. Aaron, he's the high priest. So these two cousins, they have a lot of glory and prestige amongst the nation. And then there was another post. The post that Korach felt really was his. That's the head of the family of Kehas. Kehas is Amram and Yitzhar's father. So Kehas is Moshe and Korach's grandfather. And the head of the family went to another cousin, Elitzaphan ben Uziel. Uziel is a third brother, son of Kehas. And Korach was miffed. He was disappointed. He was dejected. And he was mad. He was piping mad. And he launches this rebellion, this insurrection against Moshe. And he gathers with him some co-conspirators, 250 unnamed heads of the Jewish people. And the two rabble-rousers, Dasan and Avir, and Dathan and Abiram, and a gentleman by the name of On ben Peles. And they begin lobbying the people against Moshe, against Aaron. Are you better? Are you special? Why do you lord over us? Are you supreme over us? You're taking all the goodies for yourself. Moshe, you're not legitimate. We're all holy. You're no special. And he begins this battle against Moshe. And the story of this conflict and the aftermath and how this rebellion was squelched, that's the bulk of our Parsha. Korach, he lobbies the nation and he presents a different perspective, an alternative view. Moshe, he's not legitimate. Aaron, he's not legitimate. I should be the high priest. Maybe everyone should be the high priest. Why are they better? Why are we inadequate? God spoke to all of us. The entire nation is holy. Now, it is interesting, just to get us started here, Korach, he has a bone to pick. He has a claim against Moshe and Aaron, but he actually does not seek out, he does not target Moshe's position. He wants only Aaron's position. So isn't it interesting? He doesn't go for the top role, the role of the king, the role that Moshe has. He seems to accept that, but he says, I should be the high priest instead of Aaron, and then they have the duke-off, as we shall see. So the commentaries tell something very interesting, just as a warm-up for this week's Parsha podcast. They tell us that Moshe's position, that he's the king, that is a position that they didn't really want. That was responsibility. That's real responsibility. They viewed Moshe's position as being one, a necessary position, a serious position to make the tough decisions, and Aaron's position, that was much more enticing to them. To be the high priest, to go into the Holy of Holies, to have that grandeur, that's what they wanted. They didn't want the responsibility. It's almost like there are certain jobs that are very appealing, and there are other jobs that are maybe even more prestigious, but they entail a lot of work. There's a lot of work, a lot of responsibility. People don't want the responsibility. They want the glamour. Aaron's position they viewed as being glamorous. Moshe's position, his role, that was one of a lot of responsibility that they did not want. They set their targets against Aaron's position. And Moshe, of course, we know the story. He tries to bring them back and tell them, well, you're Levites, you have a lot going for you. Don't do this. If you do this, he threatens them, you're going to end up in a very poor place. We're going to have a shootout, a standoff. Everyone brings ketores, everyone brings incense, and we know that will end very poorly for the one who's not legit. God will decide who is holy. And indeed, the 250 elders that joined the Korach rebellion, they bring the ketores, and they die. And we know the story what happens to Korach and his family and the other conspirators, Dasan and Aviram. They are swallowed up by a sinkhole that opens up its mouth and consumes and engulfs Korach and his rebellion. And then there is some follow-up that happens, as we shall see. And we know the story, of course, of On ben Pelas. He was part of the original group of collaborators with Korach and his rebellion, but ultimately he did not die. He did not suffer the fate of Korach and the other people. His wife saved him. His wife told him, hey, On, you're joining the Korach rebellion. Maybe you think there's some legitimacy to what he has to say, but right now you're a nobody because Moshe's in charge. Moshe and Aaron are in charge. And suppose Korach is right. You're still a nobody. What's in it for you? Just opt out. He opts out of this dispute, and we're told that his wife gave him to drink. He told his wife, well, how can I opt out? I told him I'll join the rebellion. I told him I'll be there the next day, and I'll bring the ketores, I'll bring the incense. He says to them, listen, you just drink a bit more than you're accustomed to, get a little drunk, go to sleep, and I'll make sure that no one comes in and pulls you out of your stupor. And she reveals herself. She's a bit immodest. She uncovers her hair, and when the people come in to wake up On to join the rebellion, they see her at the entrance, and then they quickly bolt. And by the time he wakes up, they're all dead, and the rebellion has been quashed. That's the story of our Parsha, the story of this rebellion. Now, I want to kind of study the way and the manner by which Korach's rebellion was quelled. You see, something very dramatic happened. Moshe made an announcement to the whole nation. And he says, these people are going to die because they're not challenging me. They're challenging God. I did nothing on my own. Everything I did was because the Almighty directed me to do it. And therefore, their challenge is not against me. It's against the Almighty. And therefore, they'll die in a very memorable and dramatic fashion. And if they die in a normal way, in an ordinary way, if they die of old age or of heart disease, or if they get cancer, God forbid, or they have an ordinary accident, bungee jumping, skiing into a tree, falling off their horse or their donkey. If something that you've heard of happens to them, well, then you know I'm not legit. But if the Almighty creates something which never happened before, and they die in a completely unique way, and the mouth of the earth opens, and it snatches them, and it closes up, and they get consumed into the underworld, then you know that the Almighty indeed spoke to me. And everything that I'm doing, and everything that I'm saying, and all my posts that I'm assigning, they're all divinely ordained. And indeed, Moshe finishes speaking, the mouth opens, it swallows up Korach, and all his people, Dasan and Aviram, they get swallowed. On is spared, of course, his wife saved him. And then right afterwards, the 250 collaborators are engulfed in a fire. If that's what we know about the story, we would say, okay, well, there was a rebellion, and the rebellion was stamped out, and the nation was once again restored to faith in Moshe, as Moshe serving the people faithfully with integrity and only telling us what God tells him. But it doesn't end there. The shovels of those 250 collaborators who brought the Ketores, they are made into plating for the altar. And whenever you see the altar, you see that it has a sheen on it. And that will remind you that you should never challenge Aaron. Okay, so there's some sort of lasting, enduring testament to this event. But it doesn't end there. Chapter 17, verse 6. The people complain. They complain the following day on Moshe, on Aaron, and they tell him, Atem hamisem es am Hashem, you caused the nation of the Almighty to die. So we just had this rebellion. It was stamped out. And Moshe pulls out these miracles. There's no one who could possibly challenge the legitimacy of Moshe, you would think. The next morning, they accuse Moshe and Aaron. You killed the nation of Hashem. And they gather up and they gang up against Moshe. Chapter 17, verse 7. Bihi koel ha'ida al Moshe val Aaron. They are seemingly roused up to go attack Moshe. Of course, the truth is, Moshe and Aaron didn't do any of this. It was Korach and his sinfulness and his envy. That's what caused his downfall. It wasn't Moshe and Aaron, but the nation somehow is persisting, and they're accusing Moshe and Aaron of wrongdoing. And before we know it, there's a plague. There's a plague that's beginning to sweep through the nation. And Moshe tells Aaron, go stop the plague. And Aaron goes out with the Ketores of the incense, and he halts the plague. And he stands between the living and the dying. And the Ketores, the incense that caused the 250 people to die, now it's causing life. No one should claim that Ketores causes death. It's only sin that causes death. So this is like the epilogue of the story, the reverberation of the story. We have the rebellion, and the rebellion's over. And Korach's been swallowed up, and the 250 collaborators, they've been engulfed in the fire. But then we have this reverberation. The next day, there's the complaining. And it doesn't quite end there. They die, or lots of people die in the plague. And then it seems like we still have to stamp this rebellion out. God tells Moshe, we have to once again reinforce the supremacy of Aaron. Tell every tribe, every head of the tribe, to write their name on a staff. And you place it in the tent of meeting, in the tabernacle. And every tribe, their leader, takes a staff and puts it in the tabernacle. And Aaron, he represents the tribe of Levi. And the next morning, they pull it out. And look, Aaron's staff, it bloomed. God selected Aaron and the tribe of Levi. And the nation is presented this evidence, further evidence to the supremacy of Aaron and the Levites. And this is such a striking, dramatic testament. This is placed for posterity alongside the Ark of the Covenant. And the verse continues, chapter 17, verse 27. The people are still complaining. And they tell Moshe, we're going to die. We're going to be lost. All of us will be lost. Anyone who comes to the Mishkan of the Almighty, anyone who enters the tabernacle will die. Hayim tamnu l'tvoa. Did we cease dying? If you think about the story of Korach, it should have ended much earlier than it actually did. It seems like no matter what's displayed to the nation, no matter what evidence they're shown, that Moshe appointed Aaron solely as per the directive of God, and he's legit, and Korach's a fraud, it doesn't seem to be enough. You have the earth swallowing up Korach and his people, and the fire, and the people are still complaining. And it's like we're playing whack-a-mole with this rebellion. Korach's rebellion seems to have some sticking power. It seems really hard to eradicate. Even after the miracle of swallowing up the collaborators and the fire that descended from heaven, they're still complaining, and they're still accusing. And there's further proof that's needed. There's the plague that Aaron stops with the Ketores, and then there's the staff off. Everyone places their staff into the tent of meeting. Why is this rebellion? Why is it lingering? And no matter what evidence is presented, the nation still ends off, we're all going to die. Because anyone who approaches the Mishkan is going to die. What's the idea? We, or at least the Korach rebellion, was based upon the fact that everyone's holy. And everyone could be a Kohen. And 250 people, we could all be high priests. And Aaron's not any better than us. That idea, it seems like it still lives on. At the very end of the story, they're saying we're all going to enter the Holy of Holies and we're all going to die. Even once they realize that they have no place in the Holy of Holies, they still seem to be convinced that we're going to get too close and we're going to be consumed. And indeed, there is a law that follows that, where there's the appointment of sentries, of sentinels, of guards around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle, to prevent people from getting too close. It seems like their claim that they end off with, again, a claim that there's a direct line from Korach's initial argument, that's addressed, and that is taken as legitimate. And indeed, there is a way to prevent it by assigning guards around the tabernacle to prevent any unauthorized entry. So what's happening over here? Why is it taking so long to squelch the Korach rebellion? Why are there so many after effects? Korach has his initial claim, everyone's holy, you're no better, we're all high priests. And no matter what is done to the nation, they still argue we're all going to die, we're all going to enter the Holy of Holies. It seems like there's a very deep idea going on over here. Korach really struck a chord with the nation. What does he say? What's his argument? What's the foundation of his argument? Kol ha'edah kulam kadoshim, the entire nation, they are all holy. And God is amongst them. Korach is telling us the whole nation, everyone, is extraordinarily special. And that argument, that sentiment, really resonated with the nation. Each one of us, we're holy and we're capable of connection with the Almighty in an unlimited way. That's what Korach was saying. And the truth is, that's kind of what we were told before Sinai. chapter 19 of Exodus, what were the terms of the arrangement of Sinai? The nation is told if they accept the Torah, the entire nation will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. So if it's a kingdom of priests, that means that the whole kingdom, everyone is a priest. Everyone's a priest. Everyone is extraordinarily special. So why does only Aaron enter the Holy of Holies? Why is it only the Kohanim, one family amongst one tribe of Levites? We're all holy, says Korach. Why are you imposing limitations if we're a kingdom of priests? Why are you, Moshe and Aaron, you're in a class of your own above the rest of the nation? That was his argument. And the underlying sentiment of Korach, it struck a very deep, very powerful, and very accurate, very true chord within the nation. And the truth is, Korach was wrong. And that was abundantly proven in our Parsha. But no matter what you did, no matter how much evidence you bring to dispel Korach's position, the people still kind of clung to his position. His underlying message is still true. And that's why we're playing whack-a-mole with Korach. And even once you prove it in a million different ways, the nation says, well, we're still going to enter the Holy of Holies. Because the nation identified with it. Our people, we got started at Sinai. And the terms were a kingdom of priests. Mamleches Kohanim. And Korach was effectively just raising that point. We're all holy. Why can't we all be high priests? Why can't we all be priests? And that sentiment lingered on and on. And indeed, at the very end of the story, the people are still believing to a certain extent that we are priests and we're going to enter the Holy of Holies even though we know we're going to die. So the final resolution to Korach's claim is to just build a fence. It's to put a defensive ring around the tabernacle. That's the solution. Because his position and his argument endured. You recall perhaps when the Jewish people were initially offered the Torah. We've talked about this many times. The Torah was not given to us exclusively. Every nation was given the opportunity to accept the Torah. We are very familiar with that midrashic teaching. The Almighty went to the nation of Ishmael, offered them the Torah, and they said, well, what's in it? And God says, don't steal. And they said, how could we do that? This is our bread and butter. This is what we stand for. We're out. And God goes to the family of Esav. Would you like the Torah? Sure. What's in it? Give us the fine details. Give us the terms and conditions. Well, thou shalt not murder. Murder? We can't abstain from that. That's what we've been doing. This is our national pastime. We're out. And so it was with every nation. The Midrash tells us every nation was offered the Torah, and every nation asked the same question: due diligence, right? What's included? What are the details of the Torah? And they might reveal to each nation the part of the Torah that they just could not make peace with. And they said, okay, if that's the case, I'm out. And they might offer the Torah to Jewish people, and they didn't ask what's in it. They just trusted the Almighty. Almighty God, if this comes from you, we're in it. And we know we could do it, because there's no way that you would give us something we cannot fulfill. Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do, we're committed to doing it even before we know the details. That is a story we've talked about it many times on the Parsha podcast. I think we've even had a podcast or two dedicated to this midrashic teaching. What would have happened had the Jewish people also asked what's inside of it, when the mighty offered the Torah to us, if the Jewish people, like all the other nations, if we would have said what is included in the Torah, what would be our kryptonite? What would be our Achilles heel? That's an interesting question that the Hasidic masters asked. The Jewish people, of course, we said, we'll do, we'll listen. But what would we have been told? What would God have told us had we asked to hear the details? We didn't ask. But what would have been our kryptonite had we asked to read the fine print? So the Hasidic masters tell us, the Almighty would have told us that it's prohibited to get too close to the mountain, Mount Sinai, when the Almighty reveals himself upon that mountain. That would be the one impossible, intolerable restriction of the Torah. The idea that there's some level of greatness, some level of achievement, of spiritual achievement that's inaccessible to us, that we cannot acquire no matter what, that is anathema to a Jew. That violates our deepest, most inborn drive. That clashes with our identity of being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We come from Abraham. We have the Abrahamic gene pulsating, coursing within us. And to be told that you cannot go to the mountain, you cannot go into the Holy of Holies, there are levels of greatness, there are realms of excellence that are inaccessible to you, that is intolerable. And that would be too much for the Jews to handle. And had we asked, what's in the Torah? That's what we would have been told. And that is what Korach based his argument upon. That's the quality of the Jewish nation that he exploited. Now, in truth, Korach, we know, was really all motivated by envy. He just felt that he was overlooked for a position that he deserved, and it was a case of vanilla envy. But the content of his message, it resonated with the people. And just as prior to Sinai, chapter 19 of Exodus, there were multiple, repeated warnings not to get too close to the mountain. Why? Because the nation, this is our weakness. Korach's rebellion. There have to be multiple, repeated reinforcements of the idea that Korach is wrong, and only Aaron and his descendants are priests. Because we have a predisposition, we have an inescapable proclivity to violently repel the notion that there's something that we cannot achieve. There's a mountain that we cannot climb. There's a level of greatness that is inaccessible to us. To be told, you can't, is unbearable. Mediocrity on any level, in any domain, in any sense of the word, is anathema to us. Mediocrity, it's an offensive term. It's a dirty word for us. Mediocrity is an insult to us. It's so bad, we have to bleep it out. That's how bad it is. Mediocrity is a word that we do not say. Mediocrity is a 4-letter word in our lexicon. And that is the sentiment that Korach channeled. And his argument, it's really sticky. And it's really hard to stamp it out. And no matter what Moshe says, and no matter what proofs are brought, no matter what miracles are presented, the nation, they end off and they say, we're all going to die because we're all going to enter the Holy of Holies. And the only solution is to recreate that fence around Sinai. And that's the beginning of the first 8 verses of chapter 18 are all about guarding the Mishkan, guarding the tabernacle. Because this nation, our nation, we have a weakness. And our weakness is that we aspire for greatness. And if we're told we can't do it, you better appoint guards to protect against unauthorized intrusion. And this claim, it has legitimacy. Mediocrity violates the fiber of a Jew. To be told that we cannot become Kohanim, that's a problem. And it's a legitimate problem. And it's an intolerable state for us. And God accepts it. And guards are appointed to prevent unauthorized entrance. I think this is a very valuable takeaway from this whole story. Our definition, the definition of our nation, it's about striving for the zenith of excellence. And of course, ideally, traditionally, historically, this was channeled towards actual greatness, actual excellence. And the greatest thing that we can do is to have closeness with the Almighty and His Torah. But the truth is, in other domains, this still exists. For us, in no matter what domain we're in, accepting mediocrity is untenable. That's the essence of who we are. And that's what we stand for. Settling for mediocrity is anathema to us. And the only way to stop us is to appoint sentries to prevent our access. The natural state of our people is to never stop unless we encounter armed guards. Our sages tell us that although Korach was swallowed up and he's in the pits, and he ascended into or descended into purgatory alive, he will have a reclamation. The verse in Psalms chapter 92 tells us, a tzaddik, katamar yifrach, will sprout like a date. And the Kabbalists point out that the last letter of these three successive words, tzaddik, katamar yifrach, spell out the word Korach. In some future time, Korach will sprout, and he'll be a tzaddik. He'll have righteousness. There is a time when the nation will be able to ascend the mountain, where everyone will be able to ascend the mountain, and everyone will be able to, so to speak, be a high priest. Korach, he's not permanently unsalvageable, because the truth is, there's something deeply powerful and true about his rebellion. And perhaps we can add another wrinkle to this idea. In the first comment in Rashi in our Parsha, it tells us that Korach and his co-conspirators, they pulled off an outrageous stunt. They had a stunt, a spectacle. Rashi tells us that Korach and all his people, they got dressed up in garments that were covered completely in tchelas wool. Remember tchelas from last week? The tzitzis, you have to have one string of tchelas, of this blue wool. Well, Korach and his co-conspirators, they all wore garments that were completely covered in blue wool. They were completely made out of blue wool. And they came to Moshe and they said, such a garment, does it need to have tzitzis? If the garment is made out of tchelas, does it need tzitzis? Does it have to have the strings in it? The fringes? So Moshe responded, yes, it does. It's obligated in tzitzis like any other garment. So they began to laugh at Moshe. You have a garment that you just put one string of tchelas and you absolve the garment of its responsibilities. This garment is entirely made of tchelas. Shouldn't it also be absolved of responsibility? That was their argument. Now, it is kind of bizarre. It's a peculiar and strange argument. But we are being told that there's some sort of connection between Korach and tchelas. Korach and this special blue dyed wool. And perhaps we can say this is a continuation of what we said last week, that this wool is made out of a non-kosher animal's blood because it symbolizes the ascent to heaven from the lowest level. We quoted the Midrash and the Talmud that Tcheles is similar to the ocean, which is similar to the firmament, which reminds us of the heavenly throne. You could start from a very low point and ascend to a very lofty point. And the Kabbalists tell us that when the Talmud tells us that Tcheles is similar to the ocean, which is similar to the heavens, which is similar to the throne of the Almighty's glory, that is symbolic of the ascension from one world to another. Now, what this means is, it's very complicated, very Kabbalistic, but there's a framework found in all Kabbalistic literature that there are four worlds. There's the world of Asiya, of action. There's a world of Yetzira, of formation. There's a world of Beria, creation. And then there's the ethereal world called Atzilus. And the commentaries tell us that when the Talmud says that Tcheles is similar to the Yam, to the sea, which is similar to the heavens, to the firmament, which is similar to the heavenly throne, that is symbolic of the ascent from one world to another. The sea, that's the world of Asiya, of action. The firmament, that's the world of Yetzira, of formation. The heavenly throne, that's a level up. That's the world of Beria, of creation. Now, our old friend Shmuley Botnick tells us, well, okay, if that is true, what does the Tcheles stand for? Because the Talmud says Tcheles is similar to the sea, which is similar to the firmament, which is similar to the heavenly throne. And if the sea is world number one, which is Asiya, and the heavens, the firmament, is world number two, which is Yetzira, and the heavenly throne is world number three, which is Beria, well, what is Tcheles itself? It must be that Tcheles, that's a world that's even lower than Asiya. That's the underworld. And who's in the underworld? Who do we know? That was swallowed up into the ground, into a world below. That's Korach and his collaborators. They went to Gehenna alive. So perhaps this is the overlap between Korach and the Tcheles. His corruption was so deep that it's even below the world of Asiya, below our world. It's like the Tcheles, it's from a lower level. But just like the Tcheles, it has the opportunity, the capacity to ascend from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. The fact that we're told in the Kabbalistic literature that Korach will have his reclamation, maybe that is why he can be properly associated with the Tcheles, because just like the Tcheles is symbolic of that underworld, the world that Korach currently inhabits, it has the capacity, or there are the ingredients in place to ascend to the highest of highs. I want to end off with one cool segment, very interesting idea, for one of the other characters of the story. So Korach, he has with him Dasan and Aviram, Dathan and Abiram, and the 250 unnamed collaborators. But there's also a gentleman by the name of On ben Peles. And his wife saved him. Because his wife said to him, what do you have to gain in this story? If Moshe's the king, well, then you're just an ordinary chap. And if Korach's the king, you're still an ordinary chap. So what's in it for you? And he says, well, you're right. I've only to lose and nothing to gain. But I promised them. I promised I'll join. The next day, I'll bring the Ketores. I'll join the rebellion. So she tells him, well, you just drink something. I have a little bit of wine. And I'll put you to sleep, and I'll make sure no one comes in to disturb you. By the time you wake up, everything will be all right. So, indeed, he follows his wife's advice. And he gets drunk, and he goes to sleep. And she sits at the entrance of the tent. and she uncovers her hair. Married woman. Traditionally, they would cover their hair. So it's considered to be immodest. So everyone in the morning, they're looking frantically, where's On? Where's On? On Ben Pelz, where is he? Let's go to his apartment. Let's go to his tent. They walk into the tent and they see his wife and her hair's not covered. They quickly bolt out. And they go and they have the Torah and they all die and he wakes up and he's spared. His wife saved him. So that's what the Talmud tells us. And we've done some podcasts, I believe, about this story and some of the elements of it. But what's the deeper secret here? After all, this is year 8 of the Parsha podcast. We always try to go just maybe one notch deeper. Why is she revealing her hair? And why is that something which discourages people from entering her tent? Now, granted, if it's not modest, maybe they don't want to see it. But is there something else going on over here? So listen to this. I found in several of the sources that they connect this story in the Midrash to the teaching in the Talmud on the book of Yoma, page 47a. It tells of a woman whose name was Kimches, and she had 7 sons, which is an accomplishment. My father-in-law, one of 7 sons. I'm one of 7 sons. To have 7 sons, I was once told, you have 7 sons, you go straight to heaven. And then I Googled it, and I said, is there any source for this idea? You go straight to heaven. And they said, no, it's an old wives' tale. But they tell it to women, and they believe it. Then they don't look for sources, and that's okay. We want our women to feel proud, to be proud of 7 sons. Okay, I get it. And the men. I thought it was true as well until I researched it, found some forums talking about it. It's an old wives' tale. Never happened. No citation for it. Chai's grandmother used to comment about this idea. The reason why mothers of 7 sons go straight to heaven because they suffer enough in this world. I don't know if it's true. Anyhow, that's the idea. To bring a Jewish child into the world is a blessing regardless. Certainly 7 sons, God bless you. But this woman, Kimches, she had 7 sons. And all 7 of them became high priests. So all 7 were so righteous that they merited being high priests. Now that gets people's attention. If you have a righteous son, well, you are very fortunate. If you have 7 righteous sons, you're incredibly fortunate. If 7 of your sons, they become high priests, there's something special about this family. Could you imagine, just as an example, if there was a family that had 7 sons that were all senators, but not really senators, they were all presidents, because they were just such incredible people, and everyone realized that they're just so special. That's not something that we would do in America. It's a meritocracy. You can't have people from the same family. Well, it's happened many times. The Adamses, Harrisons, Bush dynasty, Clintons, and so on. Anyhow, but suppose you see such a remarkable family, 7 sons, all high priests. What's your secret? The sages go pay her a visit. What's your secret? No, the commentaries point out, wait a minute. Well, they went to her. Well, maybe it was the dad. What about the dad? So the commentaries give a few answers. Maybe she had 7 sons, but they weren't all from the same husband, and therefore we know that the merit is with her. Or maybe they knew the dad. That's the second answer that the commentaries gave. They knew the dad. They knew it definitely did not come from the dad. This came from her. So they paid her a visit. What did you do? What's your secret to have such outstanding, righteous sons? And she responded, I was always very modest. And in my entire lifetime, the inside walls of my home never saw my hair. I was so modest that even indoors, and even it's my hair, my goodness, it's not the most private part, obviously. But even indoors, not a single strand of my hair was ever seen by the internal walls of my house. And the sages said, that's wonderful. That's very modest. But a lot of people are like you. And not a lot of people. You're the only one on record that had 7 sons that were high priests. Now, the commentaries elaborate and they say that this actually is the reason why she merited to have 7 sons who were high priests. And a lot of people tried it, but they weren't quite as righteous as she were. They did it because they wanted sons who were high priests. They weren't really so noble and regal and dignified to be modest for modesty's sake. They just wanted to have sons who are high priests, which I can imagine is something that a lot of Jewish mothers want, right? Now they want to be doctors and professionals, lawyers. My son, the doctor. We know that story, right? Jewish mothers want their sons to accomplish great things. So lots of women wanted their sons to be high priests, and therefore they did the modesty for ulterior motives. She was just so modest. She was such a regal, noble, and dignified woman, and that's why she merited and others did not. Okay, that's what the Talmud tells us, the book of Yoma on page 47a. What this tells us is that to be meritorious, to be righteous, to be a high priest, one of the things that are needed is modesty, even indoors and even covering hair. And the commentaries tell us the men, they're looking for On. On is one of our people. He's going to be a high priest alongside us. And they walk into his house, and indoors they see his wife, and her hair is not covered. And they understood that there's some sort of connection between righteousness and modesty, and even modesty when no one's watching, and even modesty of hair covering, even indoors. That is part of the ingredients that are needed to be a high priest. And once they saw his wife there, hair is uncovered, they bolted. On ben Pelas is not going to be a high priest, and they left him to be. So again, this is just an interesting connection between these two stories. We have a story in the Midrash about On ben Pelas and how his wife saved him, and specifically she uncovered her hair indoors. And we find a Talmud about Kimches. Again, this is like 1,000 years later, but Kimches, and she attributes her merit in earning 7 sons who were high priests to her maintaining modesty indoors, covering her hair. It's not a coincidence. There's something about that. Now, what exactly it is, and why specifically a quality of modesty is associated with high priesthood, that's a different question. But there's like a deeper understanding and showing some sort of precedent for this notion. They wanted to be high priests. They wanted to ascend the mountain, and they thought that they were worthy of it. And they said, "Oh, you're not worthy of it." And indeed, it turns out they weren't worthy of it either. Why? Because Aaron was selected. And even though it doesn't make sense to us, and it violates our aspirational greatness that we all have baked within us, and it does trouble us when we're told that we cannot do it, nevertheless, we accept it. There's the copper plating on the altar. There is somewhere this staff of Aaron that bloomed and blossomed. We accept it. And even if we don't, there are armed guards to prevent us from getting too close. But I will say, in other areas of life, we are predisposed for greatness. And unless there are armed guards, and if we don't encounter armed guards, we must go further and never, never accept mediocrity. I thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It was a delight. I'm in the basement in Muncie, New York. We survived the 3-day drive with the help of the Almighty. We have a Parsha podcast. I thank you for listening. Send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day, a splendid, fantastic week, and of course, an incredible, uplifting, inspiring, and productive Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk again next week.